The T-10 heavy tank, aka Object 730, during the prototype stage, was the last Soviet heavy tank ever made. It came about after World War II. It was designed to keep up with the fast-changing world of tank warfare during the Cold War. The T-10 is basically the final version of Soviet heavy tanks, showing off all the lessons they learned about building and using tanks over the years. But over time, heavy tanks like the T-10 became less useful as modern main battle tanks started taking over the battlefield. The T-10 is a very interesting tank which is worth looking into, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. The T-10 was born out of the shortcomings of earlier heavy tanks like the IS-2, IS-3 and IS-4. These tanks had some serious problems like poor mobility, unreliable engines and armor that wasn't as effective as hoped. Now when I say that the armor of those tanks was not as effective as hoped, it's not that their armor was bad. Actually, it was really good for its time. However, they had some limitations or compromises that didn't fully meet expectations. The IS-2 and IS-3, for example, were built with thick armor, and the IS-3 had even a sloped pike nose design, which was revolutionary for deflecting shells. However, the IS-3 had structural issues. For example, its weld seams and the suspension system were prone to failures under stress, which could compromise the effectiveness of its armor in the field. Also, the IS-3's armor would struggle against newer high-velocity tank rounds. The IS-4 also had very thick armor, making it one of the most protected tanks of its era. However, this made it incredibly heavy. So much so that it couldn't cross most bridges. If a tank's protection limits where it can go, it's less useful strategically, which could be seen as a letdown. At least that's what the Soviets were thinking. The IS-7 was also a beast with extremely thick armor and a lot of firepower, but it was so massive and complicated that it wasn't practical. Its weight caused reliability issues, and its size made it hard to transport or use effectively in the field. So, when I say the armor of these tanks wasn't as effective as hoped, it's more about the trade-offs and practical limitations rather than outright failures. So, by 1949, the Soviets decided it was time for a new heavy tank, one that balanced protection, mobility and firepower. In 1949, Joseph Kotin, a big name in Soviet tank design, and basically the crazy guy who built all these light and simple tanks, led the development of the T-10 at the Chelyabinsk tractor plant. The project was called Object 730. The idea was to take the best features of earlier IS tanks and improve upon them. The goal was clear. The tank couldn't weigh more than 50 tons, but it had to be better in every other way. Early prototypes of the T-10 showed promise but had problems with the transmission, fuel tank design, weight distribution, suspension, gun stabilization, manufacturing, and the ergonomics inside the tank. Engineers tackled the various problems with early prototypes like transmission flaws, fuel tank issues and suspension problems step by step. They improved weight distribution to ensure stability, refined the gun stabilization system for better accuracy, and redesigned the tank's internal layout to improve crew ergonomics. By solving these challenges one after the other, they gradually perfected the design. After a couple years of testing and adjustments, by 1953, the tank was finalized as the T-10. Mass production began in 1954 with factories in Chelyabinsk and Leningrad taking the lead. But production was slow at first due to several reasons, like the complexity of integrating new technologies and refining manufacturing processes. On top of that, resource allocation might have been a challenge, as Soviet Union had to manage limited industrial capacity while producing other military equipment. Adjustments to the factory setups and training workers for the advanced production techniques also contributed to the slow start. Therefore, only about 200 units were built in the early years. Despite this, the T-10 would go on to have a long production run, ending in 1965. In total, around 1,500 T-10s were built. Earlier NATO estimates thought the number to be as high as 8,000. The T-10 adopted the pike nose design from the IS-3 because it was extremely good for deflecting incoming shells. However, the T-10 engineers refined it by improving the structural integrity of the weld seams and enhancing the sloping angles. These changes made the armor both more durable under stress and more effective at redirecting the impact of modern high-velocity anti-tank rounds. The front armor was 120 mm thick and angled to deflect incoming shells. The turret, shaped like an upside-down soup bowl, was cast steel and could resist powerful anti-tank weapons of its time. The tank's weight was around 50 tons, but it still had decent mobility thanks to its V12 diesel engine, which produced 700 horsepower in early models and 750 horsepower in later variants like the T-10M. This gave the tank a top speed of 42 to 50 km an hour depending on the version. Inside, the T-10's layout was pretty standard for a tank. The driver sat at the front, the gunner and the commander were in the turret, and the loader has his own cramped spot. The tank had 7 road wheels on each side. The T-10's main gun was a 122mm D25TA. This gun was designed primarily for 2 key purposes: delivering powerful high-explosive presence to destroy fortifications or lightly armored targets, and piercing the armor of enemy tanks using armor-piercing rounds. This dual-purpose capability made the gun quite versatile, allowing the T-10 to handle both anti-infantry and anti-tank roles effectively. The 122mm caliber was chosen based on experience with earlier tanks like the IS-2 and IS-3, which also used similar large caliber guns. The Soviets believed that this caliber provided the best balance between destructive power and range. Additionally, the 122mm caliber was already in production and well understood by Soviet engineers, reducing the challenges of adopting a completely new system. The D25TA was an evolution of the earlier D25T gun. It incorporated improved stabilization and mechanisms for easier operation. Although its 2-piece ammunition, meaning a separate shell and charge, slowed down the rate of fire compared to single-piece rounds, this was considered an acceptable trade-off because of the gun's firepower. This design choice also allowed the gun to maintain its effectiveness against heavily armored targets at longer ranges. The AP rounds could penetrate about 155mm of armor at 500 meters. Later versions like the T-10M got the upgraded M62T2 gun, which had better ballistics and could fire advanced ammo types like HEAT and APDS. The secondary armament included 2 machine guns, a 12.7mm DSHK in early versions and a 14.5mm KPVT in later ones. One machine gun was mounted coaxially with the main gun, and another was on the turret for anti-aircraft use. The T-10M also had a better fire control system, which included a laser rangefinder and night vision equipment. The T-10 was designed to handle rough terrain. Its wide tracks reduced ground pressure, which helped it move over soft soil, snow, and mud. The tank's suspension system used torsion bars, similar to earlier Soviet tanks, but with improvements to make it more reliable. The T-10M variant introduced a better engine, boosting both speed and operational range. With auxiliary fuel tanks, the T-10M could travel up to 320 kilometers on roads. The T-10 went through several major upgrades. One of them would be the T-10A from 1956. This variant was developed to address a key limitation of the basic T-10, its difficulty in maintaining accuracy while on the move. To solve this, engineers added a vertical stabilizer for the main gun, making it significantly easier to aim and fire accurately while moving. Additionally, they equipped it with night vision for the driver, allowing better operational capability during low light or nighttime conditions. Another one would be the T-10B from 1957. This variant was made to further improve the fire control system introduced with the T-10A. The basic T-10 still struggled with consistent accuracy when firing on the move. By adding a dual-plane stabilizer, the T-10B achieved better control over the main gun's vertical and horizontal movements. Another variant, which is also the one we have in War Thunder, would be the T-10M from 1957. It was the most advanced version, built to address the need for a tank capable of facing modern threats of the Cold War era. It featured the M62T2 gun for improved firepower, offering superior ballistic performance compared to earlier models. This gun allowed the T-10M to engage targets more effectively at longer ranges, thanks to its enhanced accuracy and the ability to fire advanced ammunition types like heat and APDS. This variant also had better armor to counter emerging high-velocity rounds, featuring a thicker and more carefully angled front plate to improve resistance against modern anti-tank projectiles. On top of that, this variant had NBC protection to safeguard the crew in a nuclear environment. Engineers also introduced a significantly upgraded fire control system, incorporating a laser rangefinder and night vision capabilities, which greatly improved combat accuracy by enabling precise targeting in various conditions. Additionally, they equipped the T-10M with a more powerful V12 engine, delivering 750 horsepower, 50 more than the other variants. This enhancement not only compensated for the added weight from the upgraded armor and equipment, but also ensured that the tank retained its mobility and operational effectiveness. The T-10 was designed to lead breakthroughs in heavily fortified enemy defenses, working in close coordination with infantry and medium tanks like the T-54. Heavy tank regiments armed with T-10s were strategically positioned, particularly in Europe, as part of the Soviet Union's Cold War deterrence strategy. However, the T-10 was not widely exported due to a combination of factors. The Soviets prioritized keeping this advanced design within their own military to maintain technological superiority. Additionally, the high production cost and logistical challenges of supplying such a heavy tank to allies made export less practical. Although there are claims that some T-10s were sent to countries like Egypt and Syria, these reports are often confused with the earlier IS-3 tanks, which were more widely distributed. This limited exportation kept the T-10 primarily as a symbol of Soviet military strength within its own borders. The T-10 never saw major combat, largely because its design was already becoming outdated by the time it was widely deployed, as the military focus shifted towards more versatile main battle tanks. However, it did play a role in the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968, where it was used as a show of force to suppress dissent and enforce Soviet control during the Warsaw Pact intervention. By the 1970s, it was being phased out in favor of main battle tanks like the T-64 and T-72, which combined the firepower and protection of heavy tanks with the mobility of medium tanks. The T-10 marked the end of the Soviet heavy tank era. By the 1960s, advances in anti-tank weapons and the rise of main battle tanks made heavy tanks like the T-10 less relevant. The Soviets shifted focus to more versatile and mobile designs. Still, the T-10 was a technological achievement for its time, combining advanced armor, firepower, and engineering. Today, the T-10 is remembered as a last of its kind, a symbol of the Cold War and the peak of Soviet heavy tank development. Many are displayed in museums, serving as a reminder of a time when tanks were the giants of the battlefield. Anyways, that was all I had to say for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think I said anything that is not right, or you think I should have added any additional information to this video, please let me know in the comments and share your knowledge. Besides that, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.